Welcome back to another episode of Nerds on Ice, where cool nerds get fired up on today's hot topics. As always, I'm your host, Chris Fury. Let's meet our cool nerds for the evening. First up, we have Chennelle Harris. She's an actor and director with a board game problem. A minimal Facebook stalking also shows that she has studied history and dagger assassination. Her Twitter handle is lovely_lady_Leo. Thanks for coming on, Chennelle.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Janae Blackwell believes in aliens, is a slight conspiracy theorist, and loves to break down the hidden meaning behind dreams. If there is such a thing, she is definitely a Beyonce nerd. Thanks for coming on, Janae.
Thank you for having me.
John Duesenberry is the co-host of the Black and White series. When John is not teaching students at the Ohio Media School, he can be found scouring long boxes looking for copies of the West Coast Avengers or trying to date your mom. Thanks for coming on, Dueser.
I love moms.
And from the Outer Rim territory of Boston, we have Daddy Louie, the host of everyone's favorite game review YouTube show, But Is It Good? You can also catch him on Mondays from 6 to 8 on Twitch, streaming some live Power Ranger miniature painting tutorials for Renegade Game Studios. Thanks for coming on, Daddy Louie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, I love talking about this. So, with the critically acclaimed HBO Max series Lovecraft Country on just about everyone's lips, you can't help but to recognize the historical impact that is shown throughout the show, known and unknown. From Emmett Till and Betsy Stringfield to the 1921 Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, one has to wonder, what else haven't we learned about our past, our present, and our future? So, we'll start with the question of the episodes, which is a 10-episode series. We'll start with what moments or what episodes stood out best and worst for you. Chennelle, we'll start with you.
I think the one that really called to me was the episode, and I can't remember the numbers because I watched these like all together and like when they aired. But when Tisha's in the oh my gosh.
Oh, Letitia,
yeah.
Letty.
Letty as it is. Letty's in her house. And instead of like being afraid of the ghosts, especially the black ghost, she's calling them. And that was like a moment to me where I was like, oh, this show is made for me. Because there's something like really strong about Black culture and calling your ancestors. So when she was like, you're not dead yet, and they appeared and like were regenerated, I was like, all right, this show's got my heart. Like,
that was episode 3. That was actually a powerful episode. There's nothing I didn't love about the show. What about you, Janae? Which one stood out for you?
I would say, was that episode 8 or 9 where we went back to Tulsa? 9. So that was a super heavy episode for me. And the part where Letty was in the room praying with the great grandmother surrounded by flames, and the grandmother outright knew what was happening, but knowing that she was going to die, but she had to die in order to save the future of her family. That was so heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And then even at the end, to see Letty holding the book of names, walking through the flames, and that slow-mo, that whole scale there, that gave me chills.
Yeah, it says something about the great-great-great-grandmother when she pretty much pegged Letty from the time she's seen her.
Yep.
She's looking her up and down. She was like, yeah, I don't know what those shoes are. But they're not from around here. Dueser, what about you? What episode or what moment in the show stood out for you?
So episode 4, which was a history of violence, when they actually go into the museum, I think that was one of my favorite episodes because what I found interesting is I'm a huge I'm an HP Lovecraft fan. I understand the whole Arkham thing. And what I love is that they just completely turned it on its head. I love that they did that because there's a lot of weird stuff that happens with Lovecraft. But the idea of them actually being able to travel technically through time and space, that's a big thing in that entire lore. And then the show just did a really great job of dealing with all of the different personalities. And that for me was a really big moment when it was Letty, it was the uncle or dad, we still don't know, that Atticus, and then not Atticus is the main character, but and George, or not George, bro, what's his name?
Ambrose.
Montrose.
Montrose.
Ambrose. What?
because we got to see the three of them. We got to see them interact together, and that was a really big, very interesting moment to kind of see where Montrose, and then the end of the episode, Montrose doing what he does is just kind of shocking and out of nowhere with Yahima.
Yeah.
Just a crazy episode, and but I loved it. I thought it was a real turning point in the series.
Daddy Louie.
So for me, it wasn't an episode or a scene. It was a character. And for me, that was Letty. Letty is by far, in my opinion, the best character on the show. She had so many great lines. She had so many powerful moments. From the very first episode when they're in the diner and, George and Tick are sitting at the table and Letty's, overhearing. She comes out. She's like, "We got to get the fuck out of here right now." Like from that moment, I was like, all right, this is a badass character. To the end of the episode when you've got her sprinting through the woods, praying, right? And there's these monsters on her and she doesn't look back. She doesn't stop. That was just a powerful scene for her. And even in episode 3, when she's in the basement and she's calling on the ancestors and, the wind is in her face. She's just all around. She was just a fantastic character. And that really stood out to me.
The actress Journey Smollett seemed to have stolen just about every scene she was in. And just amped it up. And she literally, like you said, Louie, in that first episode when she's running, I said to my wife, I said, she just broke every horror trope of a woman running in the woods. She just broke
didn't
it.
trip over a random twig.
Mm-hmm.
And I look, I'm like, that's how you run from now on. Anything tracing you in the woods from now on, don't you dare look back. Don't you trip. Don't you stop. Perfect form. Usain Bolt will be proud.
Like as a watching a horror, I don't know much about H.P. Lovecraft, but I do know Black people because I am one. So to see her run through the woods, I'm like, yeah, that checks out. Right?
Like they did their homework. They did their homework.
I'd be praying and running too. That sounds right.
So there were so many historical moments that were dropped throughout the entire series. Like I mentioned, the Emmett Till. When you see the episode where I think it's episode 3 when Diana and her friends are in the basement playing with the Ouija board.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's a no. And the one boy, he says, "Well, I have a good summer," and it points to no. Even I didn't know that Emmett Till's actual nickname was Bobo. So when you see what is it, episode 7 or 8. Yeah, 7.
Like that.
It's like 8. It's 8 because that's when they had to still say Diana and 9. And you find out that was him, that he was Emmett Till. You're just like, my heart stopped. And I'm like, I know they're dropping gems, but they're really dropping a lot of gems. The episode where I Am, Hippolyta's episode, where you see the Black woman riding on a motorcycle, that was Bessie Stringfield, who had been the first Black woman to go cross country on a motorcycle, I think 3 times. So seeing moments like this being dropped throughout the show, the Sundown Towns, you hear works of James Baldwin as being voiced over, Gordon Parks photography, stuff like that. What did this mean to you guys, seeing some of this historical influence being brought to a show that's based in fiction? Janae?
I loved it. I appreciated it so much because again, those are things that you don't know. A lot of those gems I was totally unaware of, and I liked how they pieced it together in a way to make it entertaining. And it's just not, we're just being lectured. So just in a whole, the whole show within itself being a sci-fi situation with Black people, where in the first episode you're not dead, so you could just appreciate that, and you're dropping knowledge in there too, and I'm entertained.
Mm-hmm.
I just totally appreciated it. I loved it.
Chennelle?
Yeah, I especially as someone who is a student of history and who can see these bits and pieces in the storytelling. I really appreciated that. What I really appreciated about the Emmett Till story is that, like, I remember when we all recognized it and we were all blown up on Facebook, and it's like, I wonder if this is going to be something. And the fact that it was really meant a lot, and that it focused on, in the case of Emmett Till, Diana as his friend. So we see the collateral damage. And I know we've all seen the pictures of Till, and I remember that being a transformative part of my grown up, is seeing those images and knowing this happened to a kid that was at the time, and I was learning about this old, like a little bit older than I was, to see what the city looked like and to see those Gordon Park images that I knew. And I feel like we're always taught this alternative, I don't want to say alternative because it's American history, but Black kids are taught a separate history than what you learn in class, you know? So to see what we're taught on TV and everybody's watching it, it was like it solidifies that, like, I'm not crazy, I'm here, like this is relevant, you know?
Right.
So
Louie.
I have to be honest, I didn't know any of it. Like, so, and I think that was, for me, like, it made me interested to know the things that, to know that history that I didn't know about. So, like, when the when they're standing outside the funeral, or the wake or wherever they were, and, you know, the woman comes out and she's throwing up, and you know, everybody was so distraught. I had no idea what was going on because the episode before that there was no lead up to this, right? So for me, as someone who didn't know that story and didn't know that history, it was kind of an odd placement for that scene to be, because it just kind of went into it, right? So they're all standing outside and all this stuff is going on. And so while we're watching the episode, I'm literally on my phone Googling, like, this time in history to find out everything that you guys, or, you know, you, Chris, because you had pointed it out to me actually a few episodes prior. You know, I wonder if that's who that's going to end up being. I was matter that you have a science fiction show, a horror show, but a historic show all at the same time. This doesn't take place in an alternate universe. You know what I'm saying? This takes place in our America, in our history. And I was kind of blown away at how accurate they got all of these, and scared at the same time. Like, you know, I was like, man, it's scary that all this stuff happened. But at the same time, I'm glad that they did it in a way that made it educational for people like me who had no idea.
Right.
I didn't know.
Yeah, Dueser.
So, one of the moments that was awesome for me, I think it was the end of episode 2. It may have been the end of episode 3. I've been reading a lot and listening a lot to James Baldwin over the last 3 or 4 months, and they did the kind of musicless Baldwin speech where he's talking about protecting Black women, and you get from that episode that that the grandmother, Titus's grandmother, who had been raped, was not, which was what made Titus a descendant of, or not Titus, I'm sorry.
Oh, you mean Tick.
Yeah, Tick. I keep saying Titus. It made Tick a descendant of Titus, which is an interesting thing, because the implication is that it's rape, and then you hear Baldwin talking at the end about protecting Black women. So I thought it was a very kind of like a very real thing that you were able to weave into Baldwin's words into what Tick was saying. It was I was really floored by how they were able to, like, just put that right into there, because you know, obviously that comes from, I believe that was the debate that Baldwin had with William F. Buckley back at Cambridge back in the 60s. And so it weaves all of that together just so fluidly, and that's what I loved about the smaller historical references. My pastor at my church that I go to over in East Cleveland, she did a couple months ago. She just did she actually spoke about Black history. And it was very interesting because she was speaking about it, and then I was seeing this happening, and then I just kept seeing all of these things being woven into the fabric of the show. And it was a real treat for me to see that part, because I'm a huge Baldwin fan.
there were moments like, okay, for me, I can't even say which episode, but I know that ever since seeing it realized in the first episode of Watchmen, when they mentioned Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had been reading about it for years prior to that. So it was something I had already known about, but then seeing it in Lovecraft Country, and especially throughout the episode, Montrose keeps mentioning it, so that's telling you he's lived through it. But then when you see episode 9, which is 1921 Rewind, where they go back and they go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you realize this was the most traumatic experience this man has ever dealt with in his entire life, but he dealt with it differently than his brother did. And just seeing that type of history shown on screen, talked about, even down to the point where Tick is talking to Montrose, and he was like, I never told anybody about this part. Montrose says, I never told anybody about this part. It was a stranger. He came in like Jackie Robinson. He goes through this whole diatribe. He's like, the stranger, something's wrong. He's not here. And he inadvertently kicks the bat and realizes
I got you,
he's
kid.
The stranger. Yeah, he's the stranger.
That line was so good.
Yeah, that's when I realized, I'm like, son of a bitch, this is it. And you're scream. It's one of those shows you're screaming at the screen.
Yeah,
for so many reasons, and I'm so wrapped up in all 10 episodes. I was so wrapped up in everything that was being fed to me that it took me, after Hippolyta's episode, it took me 2 episodes later to realize, when you deal with Diana's episode, that I'm like, oh, of course, why wouldn't her daughter be named Diana when her name is Hippolyta? It just made sense. There's your Wonder Woman reference right there. So having so much rich history involved, and having the science fiction angle put in, the horror, the supernatural, the adventure angle, made me want an adventure movie, whether it's about this cast or anyone for that matter of color, made me want more. And it's almost it's speaking to Hollywood, saying, hey, we can do these roles. We can be the leads. We can do this stuff. Give us, not so much give us the money, but we'll show you our way.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to turn down the money.
No, give me the money. Come on. Make it happen.
I think shows like, or movies like Black Panther, which was a 90% black cast, and being fed with almost $100 million just up front, saying, hey, boom, make it happen. I believe in you. Let's do it. Now you're seeing Watchmen, which was nominated for all these Emmys. And now you're seeing Lovecraft Country, which this is going to be another Emmy winner. I just see it. There was so much great acting, and when you have people like Courtney B. Vance, who was already an actor, and a great actor in his own right, be taken out after 2 episodes, you're just like, wait a minute, what about Uncle George? What's going on? But then you see this cast of young and up and comers, and you're like, they can handle this. So what was possibly the worst moment for you in this entire series, Chennelle?
Oh God. I don't think I'll ever recover from Ruby in the last episode. I'll never. There are things I'll look back on and like, oh, that was tough, but I'll never recover. I light a candle every night for Ruby.
She did give a new meaning to red bottom shoes. I tell you that.
Oh yes, no. So oh man, there were so many things that the writers. There's so many lines that the writers gave her, and so many moments that I connected with, and just seeing a beautiful, big, dark-skinned woman exist and be glorious in this world and take up just as much space as Journey. I just was undone in the last episode. And gosh, I wasn't ready for it. Like most of it, I'm like, okay, that checks out. That's fine. I'm like, my heart, even though there were like clues up to it,
Janae.
I would say the Bobsy twin episode in that alley.
Yeah.
the spit.
Hmm.
That whole scene, but the spit for me, that just made my whole soul come out of my nose and spill out everywhere. I don't It's just something about the spit and the way that it was just so vile looking, and it just made him look even uglier than the person that he already is. Like
Hmm.
that, ugh, it just did something to me.
Yeah, yeah.
It did something to me. Like I love that whole episode, but that part right there, ugh, it
Crushes you.
kind of, yeah.
It crushes you.
And he just walks away like, and
Like
it
it's
just kind
nothing.
of like it's nothing, and it just brings you back to current day, how what things are happening with police brutality. It brings you back to things that were happening back then, and it's just like, well, what's the difference now? Yeah, it's
Mm,
magic involved, but there's still that disrespect of your space and of your being. It was a heavy situation there with that spit.
mm,
Ugh.
mm. Dueser.
Interesting, very interesting. There are actually some uh there's some moments in there that I, had to turn off at a certain point. When I was watching the Emmett Till episode,
Mm,
I had to stop that at the end of that first scene. I had to, because that one got to me. Like, that broke me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. Because to be honest with you, I knew, but I guess I didn't know, right?
mhm,
Like, and so I had to stop and just kind of just absorb all that. So that was rough. And then um, there were some there were some pretty bad moments. The moment where his uncle Montrose kind of rejects the man that he loves, that was a real tough moment for me as well,
mhm,
because you could tell that the two of them really did love each other. And of course, then later on, we find out more during the 1921 rewind about who Montrose really is. We kind of, we had already kind of figured that out, but the idea that even at such a young life, he had already kind of lost the love of his life, and then he had always been just in a denial about who he really is. That resonated throughout the entire series with me.
all right. Louis.
So I don't really do well with like a lot of blood and gore. Like, if it's like an action movie and like people are slicing people's heads off, that's fine. But there were a few moments in the show. Well, first of all, the twins in the alleyway. That was just like, I'm like, whenever there's kids involved with spooky stuff, I'm like, nope, no, no, sir. I'm looking the other way. So, but no, there were a couple of parts in the show, throughout the show, that they did not hold back on the violence. The part where Ruby is shedding her skin and she's just ramming that heel up. It's just, I mean, and
Yeah.
there's just blood going everywhere.
And
And
the
then the
sound.
way that Christina opened Tick up, like in the arms and the wrists, and she's just under it, and there's blood gushing all over the place. But I think the one that was like the most brutal was when Christina was on the pier and she pays the guys to do to her what had happened to that little boy. And you see all of that, but the whole entire time while you're seeing her go through it, you're reminded that she's doing this to feel what a little child felt.
Hmm.
It's just that was rough. That was rough.
Yeah,
And
that
I mean the people that made the show, they did not hold back. They let it go, and that was rough to watch.
yeah, that episode was extremely powerful for so many reasons. Janae, like you mentioned, the episode where Lancaster spits on Diana, and just that entire moment where they're accosting her, and then they trip her, and my mind is like, she's a young girl, she's a young actress, and imagine the cycle. I don't know. I mean, maybe she can separate, the reality of this is acting opposed to everything else. But us as viewers seeing her being tripped and being accosted and yelled at, and is just digging at you, and it's on the worst possible day that she could possibly experience, and then to be spit on. But it got flipped on its head later on when she turns around and goes to the precinct and pretty much cusses them both out.
Yeah.
You're just like, and that's the Diana I know. That, she's like, number one, Hippolyta is Greek, asshole.
I love that part. I love
then
that part.
she spits on on Lancaster, and just literally just tears them down and walks out. And I'm just like, for that moment, you're worried, like they're gonna do something to her, but then they don't. And I'm like, yeah, despite everything y'all put this young girl through, she still came out on top and pretty much put y'all in their place. Like that was just it. And then you still got your comeuppance later. So this show has meant so much to not just Black people, but just people in general. Whether it's just the state of seeing how history is being shown, is showing how we can be the leads in all these different genres. It's showing that you can really tell a good story when you have a good team attached to it. And they do. They have an extremely talented team of writers, showrunners, and actors, and everything in between. And I hope they give them a season 2.
Oh,
I really do. I want to see more. I don't know how they'll do it because
season 2 scare me.
Yeah, I mean, I liked how it ended. I liked that it ended so that it tied up the majority of the questions, but there's still a couple.
Mhm.
And so it's enough to make us want to watch more.
Another season.
Obviously, we want another season, right? But if we never get one, it would be okay.
It's almost like Watchmen. It's a one and done. There isn't like
trust me, I want more.
Yeah, definitely.
I
think we all do. It's just just don't do it just because. It's just do it because you have a really good story to follow up. You can stop after season 2. Just give us something to like kind of chew on, because there was, like I said, not just a historical fact, but just everything in between, everything that's involved. They shout out so much in episode 10 when Hippolyta comes in and she's reconnecting with Diana, and she's saying, she slides the comic book under the door, and she says, "Where did you learn to draw?" And she was like, "An artist named Afua taught me." And I knew who she was talking about. She was talking about Afua Richardson, who worked on World of Wakanda and several other books. And then she gives her this robot arm, which I'm just like, Hippolyta, you really talking about somebody coming in on the clutch.
They could do a whole series. They could do a whole season of just the 200 years that Hippolyta was gone. You know what I mean? Like, even if we don't get any of the rest of the cast, just give us a season of Hippolyta, do a spinoff, show us the 200 years that she was gone.
I mean, she said it so nonchalantly too.
Yeah,
it's just like
gone 200 years.
I want the Diana and the Shoggoth series. That's
yes,
that'd be great too.
Is she just gonna go home like? I'm just gonna go to
you
school with the whole robotic
not,
arm. Like,
there's no normal after that. There's no normal after that. How do you explain that?
One thing I loved is like the way that they looked at different generations and the different way they dealt with things, especially when it came to like Montrose and raising children, and like Tick and Letty, and like how being present in young people. But then we look at Diana, and it kind of reminds me of like Gen Z now, where there's just like, there's no safety. It's just all holds bar. Like, what does she say? Like, they never learn. And then she like helps Christina out. Like, there's something really like encouraging. Like, I'm looking forward to when those who are younger than me take over. But I'm terrified of what they're gonna be capable of with their metaphorical robot arms.
I mean, it's amazing when you see Diana choking. I thought she was just gonna choke her. I didn't know she was gonna rip her throat out. I was just like, and I'm okay with that too. So, so I'm like, you brought this on yourself. And to see that Diana really had no emotion behind it, I'm like, this does not make you a killer. This just lets you know you've had enough.
Gosh. I was really interested when we talk about, especially like the Diana storyline, if they did something similar. Like, I'm currently working my way through The Haunting of Bly Manor. So, and again, thinking about American Horror Story, the idea of those same creators and those same writers being in the same room, but like set it 10 years in the future when we're like smack dab in the middle of like Civil Rights Act or something. Like, I would love to see like given that space, but also that space for historical moments that will resonate, and things that we'll have to go look up. Like now, I have to go look up World Wakanda. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I mean, you see so much being brought into the show, and it's, I mean, the costumes beautiful,
Ooh,
just great, just great,
I
just
love visuals. I'm a
yeah,
sucker for visuals.
and just everything that they were doing, even the episode that dealt with Ruby, and I think the actress Wuni Masako, that's her name. Look out for her because she has a couple things that's coming up, and didn't even realize she was in Batman versus Superman. She was actually in that movie. We'll just leave but seeing so much history and so much beautiful backdrops and everything, and then the episode dealing with Ruby where she's I can't remember the woman she was supposed to be, but when she's now the white woman, and she's eating ice cream and she's sitting on the green bench, and people were just like, oh, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand what was going on at that time. There was a historical reference being put behind her sitting on that bench.
Yeah.
It was a historical reference behind her getting that ice cream and everything else. These things meant something, and I'm all for it. There was so much. Even when you hear Tick saying, "Yeah, I went to the future," somebody else who just speaks nonchalantly about, he was like, "Yeah, I went to the future. I was only there for a few seconds, and somebody with a robotic arm put this book in my hand and pushed me back through." And I'm just like, now you look back and you're like, was that Diana? It has to be, And
Yeah, because that's very specific, right? For him
Yeah.
to say somebody with a robotic arm, I mean, that's just too specific to not be Diana.
yeah,
Unless
yeah.
everybody just has bionic arms at that point in time where he went, which is possible, I guess.
That would be crazy. Hippolyta's episode I Am, where you deal with her. In one point she's with Josephine Baker, and then she's with the Dahomey Amazons, which, fun fact, the Dora Milaje, their look is based off of the Dahomey Amazons, which is a true female tribe. So these, having all that, and that was a great thing to take out the French little French army, that first wave. I'm just like, oh, these sisters bad. Don't mess with these, and loving every bit of that, and seeing how they pressed forward, and it's just so much that this show can, they just gave you a taste, and now you're just like, I want more.
And can we just talk about how awesome the soundtrack was to that show?
It was a
Oh my
beautiful soundtrack.
gosh,
Beautiful soundtrack.
so good. I mean,
So-
they had every genre of music in that. I mean, it was just so good.
And it spoke, like I mentioned earlier, when Ruby gave a whole new meaning to Red Bottoms, and here they're playing Cardi B in the background,
Yeah,
and
I
they
know.
mention that line, you're just like, just listening to the music is already
good.
telling you that, like, there's a perfect pitch matchup of everything that they're playing, from the voiceovers to the music, just everything. Even the protecting of Black women, when in episode 3, when Letty is just sick and tired of those cars being outside the house, and she just goes out there, and all the guys immediately, without one word being spoken, they grab their rifles and they just stand guard. They don't help her out or nothing. They just stand guard. And then they hear the police sirens, and what does Ruby do? She drives up, pops the trunk, they throw it in, she
I
drives
love
off.
that scene.
And I was like, this is a very unspoken scene, and people don't understand, when it comes to Black women, it's not just the protection they're looking for the support.
Yep.
And so this is very strong visuals, very strong messages being put across.
And even with Hippolyta, the Hippolyta episode, I can appreciate that with her coming into her own and stating who she is, because Black women in general, we tend to silence ourselves or shrink ourselves to accommodate the men around us and the world around us. So just having her put herself out there and saying, I am this, I am this, I am not just your wife, I am not just a mother, I am other things beyond that. Like, I could totally appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she made herself larger than what she was physically being at the moment. Like, I just totally appreciated that.
Yeah, when
Getting her voice back.
Yeah, when you show up just nonchalantly say, yes, I've been on this earth for 200 years and blah, blah, blah. I need to be the motherboard. And I'm like, what's a motherboard? You know,
Right.
just like, she's just like, don't worry about it. I got this, you know? And when it looks like she can't keep the portal open and Tick says, you got to do this. You got to do this for your daughter, Diana. You got to keep this open. And she digs down deep. And at first it closes, and then she digs down deep and busts it right back open. Her hair turns blue, and I'm like, oh, she's Orinthia Blue now. You know, I'm like, she's the comic book character her daughter always dreamt about. You know, so to not just be the wife, not be the mother, but now be the hero.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and have that strength. And the fact that she shows up and she starts reciting these numbers when she in her episode when she's reciting numbers, and she's like, this isn't Earth because the gravity is different. And I'm like, oh, we dealing with a totally different type of person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you're right. You're right, Janae. She shrunk herself away. She even said it. She like, I made myself smaller so I can help somebody else. And it wasn't so much the fact that George made her feel smaller. She just felt like, I guess by society standards,
it wasn't a place for her.
Exactly. And that's what I loved about, especially about that episode, and the fact that the extraterrestrial being she was dealing with was beyond say. And it was such a play on words, and I'm just like, wait a minute, that's, oh, I see what you did.
See, I didn't even pick up on that until you just said it.
Yes, it was like, I'm like, oh, because I never once thought about it, about who the character was. I just wondered who it was, but I never caught a name. And then like I'm reading an article and I'm like, oh, I see what you did. So this has been an informational and very thought-provoking episode. I love talking about this show. I can't talk about it enough. It can be, I want to talk more about it. And you know, unfortunately I have to bring it to an end because you know we have so much to do. So
if you want more, there is, I don't know if you know, the Langston League put together a syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
And the information that they have, like I've been looking at the Langston League, and then Lovecraft Country Radio, if you can. I gotta shout out Ashley Ford and Shannon Houston, one of the writers.
Yeah, for the podcast. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Like it's like I would take a class just on these 10 episodes. But those are really fun if you want to play along a little more, learn a little more, see what else is hidden.
Yes. So we're gonna have to put that in our links then. So I'm calling it game, but this is the end of our show. I want to thank our guests, and we will do a quick rundown where everybody can be found. We'll start with you, Chennelle.
I am Chennelle, of course. You can find me on Twitter at lovely_lady_Leo.
All right, Janae.
I'm Janae. You can find me on Instagram at Janae Shantae.
All right. Dueser.
I'm Dueser, and you can find me on Twitter at Dueser. That's my Twitter name. And also check out my podcast. It comes out every 2 weeks. It's called the Black and White series. We do it out of the Cleveland area. We have a lot of fun and very informative.
Daddy Louie.
Find me right here at Circle of Nerds.
And I am your unforgettable protector and host, Chris Fury. And until next time, remember to educate yourself and others, entertain yourself and others, and empower yourself and others. And until next time, Chris Fury, out.
All right, everyone, chill.
To hear all of our podcasts, look for Circle of Nerds on iTunes, iHeart, Pandora, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. And if you want to see these weirdos in their natural habitat, just look for Circle of Nerds on YouTube and Patreon. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.